Hello everyone, welcome to Tutorials by Decade. My name is Decade, and in today's video we're going to go over the attack animation. So this one is going to be different. So like if you've been following along with the series, the first few videos have been very similar to others with the exception of updating to Unity 6. But a lot of the other videos that I've seen on this subject, they have the animation with the player as far as attack is concerned. But what I did is I separated the sword from the player altogether, made some changes to the sword. But then if you've gone through all the assets, you would see that in the art, I have the actual swords separated and I added some. So you have the basic sword that would normally have come with the initial sprites and all of that if you downloaded it from the website I showed you earlier. But then I also added a few different colored swords. So purple, black, blue, green, and red. I was starting to name them, different things, but then said screw it and just went with the colors. But before this video, I went through and I changed all of the pixel units to 16, the filter mode to point no filter, and compression to none. I also went into the actual sprites and sliced them at 48 to 48. So I don't know why I was trying to do 64 there, but it's supposed to be 48 by 48. As you can see, that has them all fit in here perfectly. So you may want to pause the video and go ahead and do that now. And then once you're done with that, you want to go to your player. Now, again, depending on what player character you created or chose to do for this, why does this one look so weird? Huh. Well, that's weird. So hopefully none of you chose that player character. Or what is that? Oh, palette. Oh, why is that? We're just gonna delete that. That's not necessary. Anyway, so depending on which character you chose, 1, 2, 3, or 4, it has an accompanying attack sheet. So since I'm doing player 4 here, I went and changed this one to 16, point no filter, and the compression to none. And then I went in and I changed the size of this from slicing it, grid by cell size. I did 32 by 32. So that's what those ones are. And then hit slice and apply. So once you are done with that, we are actually going to start working on the animation. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have the sword be a child of the player and only animate whenever the player attacks. Now, I will forewarn you when we're said and done, it's going to work, but it's not going to work 100% yet. And that is because we are going to be doing some changes a little bit later, and I don't want to have to go through and undo the changes I've already done. And it would just get confusing for you and, quite honestly, me and everyone else. So it'll work, but it'll be a little weird. So just to give you that heads up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to player, we're going to right click, and we are going to create an empty. And then this one we're going to call, we'll just call it sword handler. There we go. So on the sword handler, we need to add an animator. We also need to actually, it should automatically add it when we go to animation. So again, I got to pull my project down here. We'll make it a little bit bigger. So in order to begin, we got to hit create. So as soon as we hit create, it wants to know where to put this. What we're going to do is we're going to go to art, or assets, I mean, animations, new folder. We're going to put just swords. And we're going to make sure we're in that one. The very first thing we're going to do is sword idle. Now, as I've said in almost every video, make sure that you spell everything correctly and you know what each thing means. This is going to come very important shortly here. So, sword idle. Perfect. It did not put in sprite renderer on here, so we do need a sprite renderer. There we go. We don't need to mess with any of this right now. All right. So after we do sword idle, we're going to create a new clip. And we'll do this one. Sword down. We're going to hit that. Then we're going to go to our sword attacks and just this first sword here. Oh, let me go back. The sword idle, you don't want anything in. That's going to be what's called an empty animation. You'll see why here shortly. But for sword down, we're going to take that one, this one, this one, and this one. And if you remember from when we animated the player, you want to add that last one twice. We can hit play real fast and it's not showing up. The reason why it's not showing up is if you go to the handler here, you can see that it is not, like it's there, it's highlighted there in orange, but it's not showing up because we're not on the right sorting layer. So we want to be on player. We don't want it behind the player, so we want it on sorting layer, player in order 1. That way it shows up in front of the player, and it might look a little weird right now, but that's because we're not animating the player. We're going to do that here in just a minute. Then we're going to create a new clip. We're going to call this one sword up. And then it should be the next 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then add that 5th one there, which is the repeat of the 4th one. We'll hit play. There we go. Create new. Sword right. And it should be these 4. Play to make sure, yep. And then we're going to create a new clip. And we're going to name this sword left. And it should be the last 4 on the sprite sheet there. And we'll play it just to make sure. And there we go. Perfect. All right. So now that that is done, what we're going to do is we are going to go to our animations folder. We are going to go to swords. And we're going to right click. We're going to go to create. We are going to go to animation. And we're going to go to an animation override controller. We want to name this one. We'll name it starting sword. Now, when you click on it, you'll see over here in the inspector, it's looking for a controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the sword handler controller in there. And you'll notice that the 5 animations show up here. So now all we got to do is just match the animation. So sword down, sword idle, sword left, sword right, and sword up. Now, the reason why we're doing this way is because if you want to have the game later on, you want to get like an upgrade for your sword in the game, instead of like animating the player character 1,000 different times, or instead of doing a bunch of insane code to try to get this done, we're going to do this the simplest way possible, and that is by creating these overrides. And we'll see how to do that in code. But essentially, if your player gets a sword upgrade, all you have to do is run essentially 1 line of code, and ta-da, you're done. But again, I will show you that here in a little bit. But for the sake of demonstration, we are going to do the exact same thing with any one of these. I'll just do the blue sword since it's right above there. So we go to here, create new clip, and we'll name this one blue down. And we'll just do the same thing when we run these 4 sprites in here. We can hit play to make sure they animate properly. And then we just repeat the process just like we did with the normal one. I'm not going to do all of them just because we'd be here forever, and it's honestly the same process for all of them. So if you want to do all of them, by all means, go right ahead. Just make sure, again, that you're naming them something that you'll know what they are, and make sure you're putting them in the right folder. So I'll just do blue right. Good there, and then blue left. Again, if you want to do all of them, you can. If you only plan on using 1 or 2 of the swords, then, you know, do whatever ones you think you're going to need. Or if you want to do all of them, go for it. I'm just going to do 2 for demonstration purposes. And then, again, the rest will be up to you, but I'll show you how to get there. So don't worry about that. But now that we have that, we're going to go back to our animations. We're going to go back to the swords. We're going to right click. We're going to recreate, or go to create. Go to animation, animator, override controller again. This one we'll just name blue sword. Right? Yeah, blue sword. And then again, over here where it says controller in the inspector, you want to bring the sword handler controller over. And you're going to see all these ones on here. We're not worried about that. We just want to go where it says sword down, we want to put blue down. Where it says sword idle, we're just going to use the regular sword idle. Where it says sword left, we are going to do blue left. Where it says sword right, we're going to do blue right. If I can get my bearings here, and then sword up, we're going to do blue up. And then the rest of these can remain blank. And as you add more, you will see more of these fill in. You don't need to worry about those. We only need the ones that say sword down, sword idle, sword left, sword right, and sword up. And trust me when I say, this will make sense here in a little bit. All right. Now that we've got that, we'll go to our sword handler, make sure that the sprite renderer is here. We will change that sprite to none. It won't affect anything. It just gets rid of that sprite there. We're also going to go to the player, and we're going to add the player animations. So it's going to be very similar to what we've done before. We're going to create a new clip. Now we're going to make sure that the animations go into the player animations. And we're just going to type in attack down. We'll go to our player sprites. Remember, it's the player sheet for whatever player you chose. So 1 is these 2, 2 are these 2, 3 are these 2, and 4 are these 2. So we are going to do 4 since I chose 4. And the first 4 sprites on that list are what we need. And remember to repeat the last one twice. Let's hit play to make sure it looks good. And then we repeat the process. So attack down, we'll do attack right since it's the next one on the list there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat. Create new clip. Attack up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat the last one. And lastly, attack left. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat the last one. So now that you have those in, if you want to hit play on them just to make sure they look good, you want to go up to the animator. And as you can see, I was actually messing with this a little bit earlier just to test some things. But you see this any state right here. If you remember from the video when we first animated the walking, any state means that no matter what state your player is in, it can go into an animation tree. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click underneath any state. We're going to hit create. From new blend tree, we are going to name this the attack tree. Okay. And I've already added this bull over here. But what you're going to want to do is you want to hit this plus, you want to hit bull, and you want to name it something like mine is attacking. Again, we're going to be doing stuff in code and the code won't know how this is spelled. So it's just going to assume that you're doing this correct. So make sure you spell it and capitalize it however you want to use it in code. Again, mine is just lowercase is and then uppercase A for attacking. But you want to add that bull in there. From any state, you're going to right click, make transition, and then down to the attack tree. And then from attack tree, you're going to right click, make transition to the idle tree. So this transition here, you want to go to conditions, hit that little plus, change the condition to is attacking, and you want it to be true. And then for this transition between attack tree and idle tree is no exit time. Actually, there is no, there's no exit time. Conditions again is attacking and false. You want to make sure that transitions into idle tree. Otherwise, if you accidentally transition it into walk tree, after the animation plays, you're going to get a weird little walk animation if your character's standing still for like 1 frame, and it looks really weird. So make sure that transition is into idle tree. Then we're going to double click on the attack tree, click on the attack tree, blend type 2D simple directional, move X and move Y. We're going to add our 4 motion fields. For this one, 0, 1 for up, and we want to change that to attack up. For this one, it's 1, 0 for right, so change that to attack right. This one, 0, -1 for attack down. And then -1, 0 for attack left. And then to match our walking animations, we're going to add 4 more motion fields. And -1, 1, and then we're going to make that the attack left. 1, 1, we'll make that attack right. 1, -1, the attack down. And -1, -1. Oh, what happened there? -1. There we go. So -1, -1, and then that will also be attack down. I'm not going to go over why I do 8 in this video. If you want to understand why I did 8, go back to the one we animated the walking, and I explained it all right there. But nonetheless, we have our 8, and we are good to go here. I can't stress this enough. Make sure you add the bull is attacking or whatever you want to call it, as long as you know it's that. And now we can actually do some code. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our scripts, and I'm just going to put this in player just because it's part of the player. But I'm going to right click, I'm going to create, I am going to go to scripting, and I'm going to go to mono behavior script. I am going to name it sword manager. Then I'm going to double click it to open it. My Visual Studio was not open, so here it goes. Perfect. Now, what we're going to do, for this, we don't need update, so we can get rid of the update. Up here, we are going to add a couple variables. We're going to put serialized field first. And we're going to do private animator sword animator. Then here we're also going to, we're also going to make this a serialized field, and we're going to do private animator override controller, and then sword animations. And then this last one doesn't necessarily need to be serialized, but it's just so that way it's easy to see in the inspector, just to make sure everything's working right. Private int, and then current sword index equals 0. So the one thing I didn't do up here was make this an array. So there we go. So if you put these little brackets here at the end of something, you're going to make it an array. Again, if you've never done programming before, I suggest you really dive into some beginner courses and stuff first. But an array is essentially kind of like a list. And you'll be able to add multiple things into that list. And using code, we're going to be able to change those animations. So like how I had the starting sword, which was the white sword, and then I did the animations for the blue sword. I'll be able to switch in code from the blue sword, the white sword to the blue sword. But what we need to do first is in start, I'm going to put this little check in here. So if sword animator is null, meaning it's not there, then we need to throw up a little debug.log error. And then we're going to say missing sword animator. I suggest that throughout code, especially whenever you get more complex coding going on and larger scripts, that you put some sort of check in place. So one way to do it is with error codes like this. Another way to do it is by putting in like, hey, if this wasn't here, let's try to automatically put it in. So in other words, if this wasn't here, I could have put in, actually it did it right there for me. Sword animator equals get component animator. We kind of did that on player, where we had like animator equals get component. But we're going to do this one manually just because it can get kind of confusing. So that's the reason why these are serialized fields, and we're not doing that. But nonetheless, there's different ways that you can catch errors. This is just one way that I'm doing this, and this is just if I forget to do it later. But the next thing we want to do is we want to put in here equip sword, and then current sword, how about if I spelled right, index. Now it's going to throw this error because we have not created this function yet. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to make it a, we'll make this one private void equip sword, and then int sword index. So what we're saying here is anytime you put something in parentheses for a function like this, it's saying it's requiring something. So this one is going to require an input. It's going to be an integer. And for the code purposes, we're just calling it sword index. So if sword index is greater than or equal to 0, and the sword index is less than sword animations.length, then we're going to do the following, which we're going to do sword animator dot runtime animator controller equals sword animations sword index. So essentially we're telling it what sword to use from that list. And then the current sword index is going to be sword index. And then we need to also be able to upgrade the sword. So in order to do that, this one we're going to make public. And the reason being is we're going to want to be able to access this from other scripts. For instance, if you have an object that will upgrade your sword and you pick it up, the script of that object will be able to access this particular function and do what it's supposed to do. So we're going to do public void upgrade sword. And essentially all we're going to do is if current sword index is less than sword animations length -1. The reason why we're doing -1 if you're new to code is because indexes and lists and all that stuff, they start at 0. But when you're calling the length, it's starting at 1. So in other words, if you have two things in that list, they are listed as 0 and 1. But when you're calling the length, it's counting it as 1 and 2. So we're doing the -1 to make sure that the sword indexes aren't going out of the range. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call equip sword current sword index +1. So it already kind of filled it in for me there. And then we haven't done this one yet, but we're going to do sword idle. And the reason why we're doing that is we are going to create a play animation and a idle animation using code. And if we don't put this sword idle in here and play the sword idle animation until the player actually swings the sword, it'll just be stuck doing an animation like constantly, and because it doesn't know what to do until you tell it what to do. So we're just essentially telling it to, hey, don't play anything. Now we're also going to do a public void play attack animation with a string called direction. And I'll explain that to you here in a minute of why we're doing it like this. But we want sword animator dot play and then sword plus direction. So essentially what we're doing here is we're telling the animator to play a specific animation. Now, if you remember back here in Unity, I made the swords. Where did I put them? I got all confused here. I made the swords and the sword handler. It's easier if you just look at here, the starting sword. You know, sword down, sword idle, sword left, sword right, and sword up. So using this code here, so it's gonna play sword plus a direction, and we're gonna get into that under the player script here shortly. But we're gonna pull from the player script a direction, and we're gonna have it say up, down, left, or right. So it'll combine the word sword plus one of those directions, and it'll know to play one of these animations. And that might not make any sense to you right now, but it will here very shortly. So now that that's done, sorry, I accidentally clicked off my notes here. So now that's done, we want to make one more and call it public void sword idle. And essentially all we're going to do here is the same thing, but we're going to tell it to play sword idle. So that should be all that we need to do for the sword manager, at least for right now. What we're gonna do over here in the player is a few other things in order for this to work right. So the first thing we need to do is make a reference to that sword manager script. So I always put my references to other scripts usually at the very top of all of the variables. And we're going to make serialize field private sword manager and call it sword manager. And then one other thing that we need to do is make a private string direction. All right. So those are the only two variables that we need to add. Down here for simplicity, we're going to make direction equal down. And the reason why we're doing that is if you don't do that, as soon as you start the game, if you try to attack, it's going to play the animation for the character, but not the sword, because the sword's not going to know what direction you're going just yet. So that's the reason why we did that. Now what we're going to need to do is in handle and move animation, or handle movement and animation, we need to do a couple things. So in the if statement, move change not equal vector 3.0, we're telling the player's animator what direction they're going and to animate. But we also need to have it tell the direction of the sword animator, and in order to do that we need to change what the direction string says. So what we're going to do is we're going to do if movement change dot x equals 0, then another if statement. Oh, there we go. So if movement change dot y equals 1, then our direction is going to be up. And again, capitalization is important there. You remember on the animations, I have it as sword lowercase, but then uppercase first letter of whatever direction. So that's why it's very important to remember what you've done. And then I think I could do an else statement here. There's only one other one, which is -1. So yeah. Yeah, else if, we'll do an else if movement change y equals -1, then our direction equals down. Okay. That's all we need if movement change.x is 0. But if movement change is 1, well, for x, then we need to do a couple other things. So if movement change dot y equals, why did I put a random j in there? There we go. Equals 0, or movement change dot y equals 1. Then that means our direction should be, I believe, right. Yeah. Else if movement change dot y equals -1, then our direction is down. And then one more else if, and that's movement change.x equals -1, which then if movement change.y equals 0, or movement, oh my god, what is going on with me today? There we go. So if it's either one of those two, then our direction equals left. And if our movement change.y equals -1, then our direction is down. There we go. So that should cover all of the directions. So we should be good with that. And that's all we need to do, except why is this? Oh, I forgot to put the, oh, what's happening there? Stop it, stop it. My equal button got stuck. My God. Looks like I need a new keyboard. All right. Well, anyway, that took care of that. So now we have all of our directions covered, and you're going to see why that's important here in a minute, because now we got to create a few other things down here. So the very next thing we need to create is a private void handle attack and animation function. And all we're going to do in here is if input dot get button down is attack, then we're going to start what's called a coroutine. We're going to call it attacking co. So what a coroutine does is it runs code in time. So essentially the way coding works is it either doesn't work until it's called, or it works all the time and doesn't know when to stop. Whereas a coroutine, you can like have little functions or little snippets of code run within a certain amount of time and then stop when that coroutine is over. So in order to create a coroutine, we're going to do a private IEnumerator. There it is. And then again, make sure it's named the same as you named it up there. Now this is going to stay highlighted red until we actually put some sort of time constraints in there. But the first thing we're actually going to do is set the player animator and its bool to the bool of is attacking to true. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to call that sword manager. The sword manager dot play attack animation, and it's going to ask for a direction, so we're going to put in that direction. So again, all that stuff that we did up here to determine what direction is what, down here, even though this says direction, as far as the code is concerned, it's saying down, left, up, right, whatever. So that's going to send it back to the sword manager, and it's going to change sword plus direction to sword up, sword down, or whatever direction we're going, and it'll play the proper animation to go with it. Now what we're going to do here is yield return null. This is the best way I've seen to do this, because if we don't do this and change that bool back to, that is attacking bool back to false, then the animator will just keep playing and playing and playing, and we don't want to be into any loop or anything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to yield return new wait for seconds, and we're going to wait the entire length of the animation. So the animation is 0.32 seconds long. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can find out how long animations are. I'm not going to get into that right now. Just trust me when I say that the animation is 0.32 seconds long. Okay. After we do that, we're going to tell the sword manager to, well, what was it? Sword idle. So we're going to tell the sword manager to call sword idle. And as far as coding is concerned, that's all we need to do. So make sure you save your code. Make sure you save the sword manager code. You're going to go back into Unity, which Unity's compiling here. Now, one thing that we need to go over that I kind of touched on before, I believe, but if not, we're going to touch on it right now. If you go up to Edit in Unity and go down to Project Settings, you're going to see a whole bunch of different project settings. You want to go to Input Manager, and you'll more than likely see it like this. So you're going to want to click on that, and you're going to see all this stuff drop down. Now, right here, I've already changed this to attack, but it's going to say like something like Fire 1. So if you click on this, and it drops down, you'll see you can change the name of it. So I've already changed it to attack. You can tell it what buttons you want. Like I have it as left control, but we don't want that. We want space. There we go. Right. And then you'll also see a Fire 1 down here, and usually it's for a controller or a joystick. I do believe joystick button 0 is the A button on an Xbox controller or the X button on a PlayStation controller. I will provide a link to a website that I use all the time to help with this in the comments below. But yeah, just want to make sure you go in and change Fire 1 to attack. That way, this will work. Oh, one thing I forgot, speaking of making sure this works, we did all this stuff in player, but we are never calling this, which is kind of why it's sort of grayed out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to update. We're going to copy and paste the name of that. Go to update, paste it, save it, and there we go. So there's a few things that we're going to need to do in Unity. Once Unity decides to cooperate with me, we're going to have to go to our sword handler, and it's asking, or we need to add the sword manager script to here. And it's asking for the animator. You can just drag the sword handler to there. And it's asking for these animations. So we're going to hit the plus 2 times. And if you're not already on the folder that has your overrides in it, make sure you get there, and you want these two. So I named this one starting sword, so we're going to put that one in element 0, and then blue sword in element 1. Now what we're going to do now is go to player, and your player script is going to ask for the sword manager script. So you just drag sword manager onto there, and there we go. So now that we've done all of that, we're going to give this just a quick little test to see if this worked. We're still able to move around, and we are attacking. Perfect. So this is where what I mean by I said it was going to be a little weird. Like I can hit attack 1,000 times, and it just looks weird. We're going to fix all of that in a later video, so just ignore that for right now. But the one thing that we're not able to do is switch to the new sword, because even if you come down here in the sword handler and change that current index to 1, it still does the starting sword. So as a temporary quick fix, we're going to come here and we're just going to put if input dot get key, and we'll use escape, it doesn't matter, but get key down, key code escape. We are going to, I hate how it puts that there, it drives me crazy. And that drives me crazy too. we are going to call the sword manager dot upgrade sword. Alright, so again, this is just a temporary fix. We're going to be getting rid of this in upcoming videos, but this is just a test. Let it compile. And then we're going to hit play. And as you can see, we got the white sword, but as soon as I hit escape, now we have the blue sword. So we've managed to accomplish everything we wanted to accomplish. So awesome job on that. If you guys have any questions, comments, or anything like that, make sure to hit us up on Discord or ask in the comments down below. But I'm going to end the video here, so if you liked it, make sure you give it the big old thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and make sure you hit the bell to get notifications of any future videos I release. And as always, have a good day, and I'll see you on the next one.